Hey, love. Welcome back to the Confidently Cherished podcast. And today I want to talk to you about the importance of being delusional and how to be delusional in the right way. So, if you've been on TikTok in the past few months, you've seen this video from this woman talking about, oh, be delusional, screw being realistic, go after the things you want, expect that you're going to get those things, right? And, the first couple of dozen times I saw this video, I felt some type of way about it. This idea of telling people to be delusional and not get into the real work of the fact that if you're going after the things that you want, it does take some work. And there are definitely some unpleasant things that come along with it. But the more I started to think about it, the more I realized that she was right, especially when it comes to dating and relationships. So in my work with clients, the women who typically come to me are women who have a past pattern of bad relationships. And that could be unhealthy romantic relationships. It's often the case, but also unhealthy relationships in other areas of their lives. So I'm talking their relationships with their parents weren't the best growing up, or maybe they had unhealthy relationships with their siblings or with their friends. People pleasing has led to being taken advantage of in friendships with relatives or on their jobs. And if that is your history, if you are accustomed to not being in a healthy relationship, the idea of being in a healthy relationship it can seem delusional. I see this all the time when I am posting content about relationships, or, I follow other dating coaches as well on social media, and they'll post a video talking about their marriage, for example, and how happy they are, how well their man treats them. And in the comments section, I will see women posting things like, oh, well, that must be nice. I wish I could find a man like that, but, I guess all the good ones are taken, or I'll never find a man like that. I've even seen comments accusing other women, also accusing myself of lying. Like, that's cap. Men don't act like that. Men won't treat you well like that. Men are selfish. They would never be so kind or so generous. These types of things. And I get it. Again, if all you see is unhealthy relationships, then when you come across something that is healthy, it can look foreign to you to the point of not seeming realistic. So expecting that healthy relationships are something that's possible for you can feel delusional. It can feel not right. You can find yourself thinking, is this possible for me? Most of the women that I work with are Christian. And if they're not Christian, then they're highly religious in some other aspect. So, Jewish, Hindu, Muslim. And it's funny to me because I work with so many women of faith, but there's this whole idea that, God can do anything, but he can't do this thing for me, or he doesn't want to do this thing for me. Like, I'm just doomed to be in unhealthy relationships. So in order to get to this point where you believe that your version of Prince Charming exists, if you're surrounded by poor relationships, if you're surrounded by other people constantly telling you that these things can't happen, you're not going to get to the point where you believe that this can happen for yourself. This is why people on social media are obsessed with relationship goals posts, because They see these fantastical relationships, and for them, it is all fantasy. They don't think that is possible. It's also why people are obsessed with rags to riches stories. Your overnight millionaires, or your people who grew up in a poor environment, financially poor environment, and end up becoming millionaires in their 20s or early 30s or whatever. People should take that as inspiration. They should take it as an opportunity to be like, okay, if this person can do it, so can I. But oftentimes, instead, they take it as, this is something that I can fantasize about, but it's never going to happen for me. So getting into the mindset of having a healthy romantic relationship, expecting to be cared for, expecting to be treated well, it's going to start oftentimes with you being a little, quote unquote, delusional. Once you get to the point where you normalize healthy relationships, then it no longer becomes delusional. And then that's where you can get into the point where you actually start attracting and maintaining healthy relationships. But in the beginning, it is going to feel like a very foreign concept for you. And you're kind of going to have to allow yourself to, I'm trying to say, not accept that it's possible. Because yes, you have to accept that it's possible. But you may be a step before even the acceptance, right? You may be at a point where you're just going to have to tell yourself it's possible and constantly affirm that until you get to where you can start to believe it. I don't want to say fake it until you make it, but to an extent, you're going to have to kind of, if you were a researcher doing an experiment, all experiments start with a hypothesis, right? You're going to have to accept as your hypothesis that healthy relationships are possible and work from that assumption until you actually truly believe it, until you prove it to yourself by being in a healthy romantic relationship. So with that in mind, let's talk about the 5 things that you need to do in order to move from being delusional, which is the first step, to actually getting into believing that a healthy romantic relationship is right, is healthy, is natural, is normal for you. So first, you need to change your physical environment. Particularly if you are a woman and you are surrounded by women who are in unhealthy relationships. So this is going to be the hardest thing, because a lot of the women who come to me because they're struggling to be in a healthy relationship have mothers, aunties, sisters, grandmothers, whatever, who are also in unhealthy relationships. So this is what they hear all the time. They hear the women in their life complaining about no good, dusty men. So if that is all you're hearing about, then of course, words create spells. This is why you have to be very careful what it is that you speak, what it is that you put out into the atmosphere. If this is all you're hearing, of course, this is feeding into your mindset all day long. In some cases, you are surrounded by people who are in toxic, unhealthy relationships. There are some people that you can remove from your life, and you should. You have, let's just be honest, you have friends, male or female, who are constantly in toxic relationships, and part of it is that they themselves are toxic and you don't need to be friends with them. So you can go ahead and remove those people from your life. You may also have family members who are in that category as well. Not all of these unhealthy relationships have victims. There are people in your life who are constantly in unhealthy relationships, but they themselves are also unhealthy, and they also have a large part in these relationships. They're not victims who just happen to attract bad people who take advantage of them. Some of them are toxic themselves, and you need to separate yourself from those people. If this is someone that you can't separate yourself from, like say it's your mother and you still live at home with her, things like that, then you have to start changing the conversations in your environment. You have to make that concerted effort that when these types of topics come up, you say, oh, that's terrible. I'm sorry that your boyfriend, your husband did that to you. Anyways, I was watching this really great movie the other day, and this is what happened in the movie. You're going to have to get in the habit of just making it clear that this is not something that you're open to discussing. You're going to have to remove conversations about people who are dusty out of your atmosphere. You're going to have to make it clear that this is not what you're doing anymore. I know personally, I was in a season where I was in a lot of unhealthy relationships myself, and it wasn't even necessarily real people. Let me rephrase that. It wasn't people in my real life that we were talking unhealthy relationships about all the time. My friends and I were constantly on celebrity gossip sites. So think Shade Room, Perez Hilton, that type of thing. And all this talk about celebrities and their unhealthy relationships, all of this discussion that we were having about Real Housewives and other trash reality TV shows, we were constantly talking about unhealthy relationships. And even though it seems like that's something small because it's just celebrity gossip, again, if this is what you're constantly talking about, it's also what you're constantly thinking about. And if this is what you're constantly thinking about, this is what you're also going to attract. So sometimes it's the people themselves in your life that you need to move out. Either move them out of your life completely, or they need lower levels of access to you. Sometimes it's just the conversations that you're having, and is setting that boundary with the people in your life, and is making that concerted effort to talk about other things. So number 1 is your physical environment. Number 2 is your virtual environment. Back to what I was just saying about Shade Room and TMZ to some extent, Bassa, Perez Hilton, all of those. One of the biggest game changers in my life when I made the commitment that I wanted to be in healthy relationships was to get the heck off of gossip sites. It was also to stop following certain accounts on social media. And it's funny because once you get into those habits, it can be hard to break. I can think of a period. So my husband and I have only been married for a little over 3 years. And I can think of a period that for a couple of months, I found myself being a little snippier than usual towards my husband, right? And, it happened so subtly that I didn't really recognize it at first. Like, he would say that I was catching an attitude more often, and I would brush it off. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not catching an attitude. You're just being annoying. You're just doing this right now. And you need to be more understanding. You need to change this. And I started to realize that, yeah, he and I did have things that we needed to talk about, but also my attitude changed a little bit when I joined TikTok. And the reason why I say this is because, whenever I've joined a social media platform, because, I am a dating and relationship coach myself, I always follow other dating and relationship coaches. I think that one, as a community, we can all, support each other. And 2, I always want to, improve my skills too. So I always want to make sure that I see like news stories, articles, all of that about like what's the latest study on dating and relationships, for example. And TikTok in particular in the process of following certain coaches, I was following coaches who were similar to myself, talking about the importance of healthy relationships and the importance of working on yourself, setting boundaries, ending the people pleasing, breaking the generational curses, all of that. But, the algorithm always feeds things that it deems are similar. And because of that, in the process, I also ended up getting a lot of content that was along the lines of men are trash, all men are evil. I ended up seeing accounts from women who are misandrist. And if you've never heard that word, misandrist is like misogyny is hating women, misandrist is hating men. So because I was starting to see that type of content all the time, it was starting to feed into my real world, into my environment. And it was making me upset with my husband over things that I normally wouldn't have been upset over. It was making me, honestly, like my husband said, get an attitude over things that weren't important. So, this is not to say that when you have issues in a relationship, you shouldn't bring them up. That is important. But again, if you find yourself constantly following content that is negative, that promotes negativity, that, is people with a vendetta, people who are bitter and unhealed, you will start behaving in bitter and unhealed ways yourself. Your virtual environment is just as important as your physical environment. And honestly, since the pandemic, I would argue it's a little bit more, because during the pandemic, the height of it, people were quarantined and they were isolated and they weren't talking to family and friends as much. 2 years later, some of that is still the case. I know that I personally don't go out as often as I did before the pandemic. A lot of people who, were going to an office every day are still working at home. We are more isolated than ever, which means that a lot of us are spending more time than ever on our phones. You really have to be careful about what you're allowing into your environment, both your physical one and your virtual one. Number 3 is to normalize being catered for. Oftentimes, I have women come to me with this attitude of, no one ever cares about me. I have to take care of everything myself. No one really loves on me the way that I want them to love on me. And because they feel that way, they feel like it can't happen. They feel like no one's ever going to come into their lives that really and truly loves them. They feel like if they do find a partner, it's going to be someone they have to constantly perform for, someone they constantly have to do for in order to be loved. So if this is you, I want you to challenge that assumption. I want you to really think about the people in your life who do care for you, who do take care of you, who are nurturing towards you, the people that you could count on to be there for you. Make a list of those people and remind yourself that even if you don't yet have that in a romantic relationship, you do have that in your life. And if it's possible in those other relationships, it's possible in your romantic relationships as well. If you're listening to me say this and you're saying, well, I don't even have that. I don't have supportive family. I don't have supportive friends. There are still ways in which you are cared for. Even if that is as simple as when you go into a store and someone helps you and they give you great customer service, or you get great service from the waiter in your restaurant, or you go to a spa day, you go to a nail salon or a hair salon, and they care for you. Keep your focus on that. Keep your focus on people who do take care of you and people who do show that nurturing attitude, nurturing behavior towards you. Yes, even if you're paying for it. In fact, if that is where you have to start with making it a habit of treating yourself to experiences where you know someone is going to take good care of you, then start there. Normalize that. Normalize that attitude. Treasure that. Be grateful for that as you work on improving your relationships, as you work on attracting more people in your life who do want to take care of you and who do want to love you the way that you want to be loved. Number 4 is to increase your value. Have you ever been in a situation where you bought something that was expensive, and because of that, you paid extra special care and attention to it? Like, I know for me, the car that I currently drive, I bought it new, and I bought it about a year ago. And yes, I still take very good care of it now. I make sure that, it gets the maintenance that it needs. I make sure that it stays clean. But especially the first few weeks that I got it, I wasn't so much as letting a bird poop on that car. Like, I was taking extremely good care of it because, this is the first time I bought a car new. My dad always preaches buying used cars, but because of the chip shortage, it was actually cheaper for me to get a new car. But it was my first time owning a new car, and it was like a major investment for me. So because it was a big investment, I was treating it so much better. This is the same thing for when you're in relationships. When someone really, truly loves you and cares for you, you are an investment to them. So because you are an investment to them, they treat you well. Because they really care about you, because they think that your value is high, they treat you well. And one of the ways that you can make this easier to accept is to work on increasing your own value. And this is not if a dusty man asks you, what is it that you bring to the table? You can have a whole list of accomplishments to give him. All you need to give a dusty man is dust. But that being said, it is easier for you to see the value that other people hold in you when you increase the value that you have in yourself. So when you take the time to make investments in yourself, hiring a coach or seeing a therapist or, self-care, getting your hair done, getting your nails done, working out, eating better. All of these things, when you take the time to do these things, you feel more worthy. And yes, those things will help you be more attractive as well. But the more important thing is the fact that you feel your own worth. You see your own value, because once you start to see the value that you have in yourself, it's so much easier for you to understand how other people can feel the same way about you. So by increasing your value towards yourself, you show up as more confident. You show up being more discerning. You take better care of yourself. And part of that taking better care of yourself is that you stop allowing certain people and certain behaviors into your life, because you know that you are worth more than the terrible experience that some people will try to give to you. Number 5, and our final one, is to stop trying to fit in. So back to what I said at the beginning of this episode, I told you that when you come from an environment where toxic relationships are the norm, you doing the work to be in a healthy romantic relationship, there are going to be people in your environment who think that you're delusional. There are going to be people in your environment who think that you're asking for too much. And you may find yourself dimming your light, settling for less, because other people think that you can settle for less, or think you should settle for less. I can definitely think of a situation where I was in my early 20s and, I was single, dating, wasn't really meeting anyone too special. And there was this woman at my church who tried to set me up with someone. And frankly, the guy was nice. There was nothing wrong with him. But I had certain standards that he didn't fit as a romantic partner. It would have been fine if he and I were friends, but I didn't see dating him. And, I found a very polite way to tell this woman that. And she got so upset with me. She was telling me that I was being ridiculous, that I needed to humble myself, that, who did I think I was, that I was just all kinds of wrong. Funny enough, later on after I got married, she ended up apologizing to me and telling me that, she shouldn't have said all those things, that she understood where I was coming from and that I did the right thing, that my husband was a better fit for me than this man. But I point this out because, if, again, you're surrounded by people who are used to settling for less, then once you start expecting more, you're no longer going to fit in with them. And that is going to feel isolating. That's going to feel lonely. Even if you find yourself in a happy and healthy romantic relationship, because this happy and healthy romantic relationship is going to change the dynamic of some of your other relationships, you will find people in your life, friends, family, coworkers, who will treat you differently because they are jealous. They will treat you differently just because they don't understand. Or they will treat you differently because, like I alluded to at the beginning of this episode, they think you're lying. They don't think that a relationship like that is possible. So when you talk about it, they think that it's cap, You have to keep in mind that in order to get something different, in order to make a difference in this life by breaking generational curses, you yourself have to be different. So once you do this work on yourself, you're not going to fit in. And that's okay. Eventually, you'll get to a point where, your whole circle will change and you'll find people who have the same mindset and attitude, the same standards that you have. But you may go through a period of isolation and loneliness before that. You have to remember what your intentions are. You have to remember that, again, you deserve better than the low quality experiences that other people have tried to give you. And you have to keep in mind that what's on the other side is so much better than what you've been settling for. So this is why it's so important to be delusional sometimes. Expect more. Set your standards higher. Aim higher. And understand that after you get to that point of starting to expect more, some challenges are going to come. But why would you want to spend the rest of your life with low quality experiences when you know that there's better ahead? Hey there. So you made it all the way to the end of the episode, which means I have two things to say. One, thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. And two, you like me. You really like me. So I would appreciate it if you would show that like by subscribing to this podcast so that more people can hear about it and enjoy it as much as you do. And if you want to know more about any of the links that I mentioned on this episode or any guests that I've had, be sure to go to KeishaRice.com/links. That's KESHIARICE.com/links. I can't wait to talk to you again in the next episode. So, see you then.